This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. By circumnavigating the islands of Sark, Guernsey, and Jersey, Laura Kennington completed her first triathlon in the Channel Islands. In 3 consecutive days, the plan was to swim 5 miles around Sark, kayak 28 miles around Guernsey, then cycle 45 miles around Jersey. Of course, like most adventures, it didn't all go exactly as planned. You can learn more about Laura and her other adventures at lauraexplorer.com. Laura Kennington, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Laura, before you began doing all of these adventures, what was your life like? What were you doing? Were you in a normal job?
So I have a background in the theatre industry, actually. So I was working as an actress and a singer, and I was supplementing that most recently by working within the fitness industry. So I became qualified as a personal trainer as a way of kind of a flexible way of earning money in between the other commitments. And so that kind of turned into me working in the fitness industry just before adventures.
Well, I would think that working as an actress, isn't that sort of like everybody's dream job? I mean, was there something about it that made you say, it isn't it for me?
It's a funny one because I didn't really see it coming. I'd been in that industry since I was really young. So I went to a theatre school from the age of 8, and it wasn't until my kind of early 20s that I started to maybe think that something else was around the corner. And it's really that background in the fitness industry that did it. You know, I just actually fell in love with sports, and that just completely changed my perception of what I'm capable of. And it was that curiosity of what my body can do that led to me pursuing more adventures, I guess. And I haven't really looked back since.
How did you get the idea then for this Channel Islands Triathlon?
Like most adventures, actually, it wasn't what I had in mind. So I was looking at just an island I could circumnavigate in my kayak, because I just thought that would be a really cool kind of fun story to tell. So I was just Googling all these different islands, and I came across the Channel Islands and noticed that 3 of them were just really close together. And I just thought, well, that to me just says triathlon. Why do 1 when you can do 3? So the other 2 kind of just jumped on board the plan.
How long did it take you to plan it?
So I started planning around October, November of last year. I did it in June of this year, and seriously started putting it all together from the beginning of this year. So all in, I would say maybe 5 or 6 months of serious planning.
And what about the logistics? I mean, how difficult was it to get yourself and your equipment to these islands?
I was quite lucky in that on each of the islands, I managed to recruit some local support. So logistics in that respect were a bit simpler, but I still had to coordinate the 3 different, obviously, local contacts, which was interesting at times. So we went through a couple of different options for the support boats, and just kind of, all those different strands of logistical support kind of out there and running and negotiating those there was a lot of spreadsheets.
What kind of training did you have to do to get prepared for this?
And so swimming, it was a completely new discipline to me. So that's the one that I really focused on. I've got experience in kayaking and cycling. So I was relying on kind of stubborn muscle memory for those 2 sections, but I concentrated really heavily on swimming. And I was swimming about 3 times a week we've got the docks here. So I was literally outside in the cold from kind of February, just trying to get used to the cold and trying to get used to my wetsuit and tweak my technique. So a lot of my training was focused on swimming and trying to improve that as a non-swimmer to go to a marathon swim.
Now, what is typically the length of a triathlon swim?
They start around anything from, I think that you can do like a 2K swim. Mine was 10K. So it's kind of the beginning of a marathon swim. Like most marathon swims start at 10K.
You mentioned that you were kind of new to swimming, and I will have to say that I'm kind of new to swimming as well in terms of asking questions about it. I think this is the first interview that I can think of that's had a swimming component, and I was scratching my head. So hopefully I'm asking some good questions here.
Yeah.
How cold was the water that you were swimming in?
For the actual swim, the water was around 12 degrees, and I'd been training in anything up started at around 9 degrees. So actually 12 degrees was a good temperature.
And this wetsuit, how well did that work out?
It was great, actually. A wetsuit adds a lot of buoyancy. So by the time I started to get tired, I was very thankful to have it. And obviously it does add a lot of extra warmth. The only thing that it did cause an issue with was when the salt water, I had been doing all of my swimming training in something akin to a river, basically. So there was very little saltwater content in that. And I noticed that by the end of the swim, basically, the saltwater had dried on my neck and there was kind of a chafing, and that had left some rather painful marks on my neck at the end of a few hours. But other than that, it was a good ally to have.
So what are some of the dangers that you have to be worried about as a swimmer during this part of the triathlon?
The main issues for me were tides. The Channel Islands have the third biggest tidal range in the world. So we had to be really, really careful when we were planning the logistics. And that's where the local support really shone through. So I had help from a local adventure kind of tour operator called Adventure Sark. And those guys just kayak around the island. They know it really, really well. So the route that we planned was absolutely perfect for the tides. The only other consideration was jellyfish. But luckily I saw them while I was swimming, but I think the wetsuit must have taken a couple of hits from them as well, because I didn't get any stings.
So what do you have in terms of a support as you're doing the swimming part?
So I had a support boat, just a rib kind of following me around, but the closest support I had was my support kayaker. And so he was in charge of feedings and keeping me hydrated, and just making sure that I was keeping my calories up as much as I could throughout.
Do you need to take time to rest? Do you need to take time to eat? How do you do that?
So the aim is to do it as quick as possible, just because you get cold quite quickly if you stop swimming. And actually I found that the best food for that was baby food. So I had like these squeezable pouches of kind of mushed fruit and baby food that worked really well. I had some kind of dry energy bars that really didn't work very well, because you just, you don't feel like chewing them, and they, at that point you're just so tired. Anything that isn't really good to eat, you just don't really have the motivation to eat. But yeah, the idea is just to get it down quickly and keep moving. So I was trying to do it in kind of 1 minute, 2 minutes max, and then be on my way again. So little and often.
You would just swim up to a kayak and they would hand you what you needed?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let me go back to this baby food thing. This stuff that you were eating was actually marketed as baby food?
Yeah, it's organic. It was organic baby food in like a squeezable pouch, but it was the only thing I'd really feel like eating, and it's so easy to digest as well, because actually after a couple of hours I started feeling really sick, and just kind of getting food down and keeping food down was the real struggle. So those little pouches were perfect. They're really inoffensive.
I guess when I think about baby food, it just never sounds very appetizing to think about eating it. But it tasted good? Yeah,
so it wasn't the kind of peas and carrots that you might be thinking of. They were all fruit based, so they were nice and sweet. Because the other thing is that obviously there's quite a lot of salt water on my mouth, so anything savoury, I just went off it straight away. Whereas those little fruit kind of mushed packages were pretty good, kind of like smoothies, I guess, mini smoothies.
How long did the swim take?
So it was just over 3 hours in the end.
Looking back on it, what did you find to be the most challenging part of the swim?
I think massively the last section. It was all going really well, and then that last maybe 30 minutes especially just seemed to take forever. I'd started to feel very, very sick. I'd swallowed quite a lot of salt water with the waves and things like that. And so I was just kind of really nauseous, and at that point I couldn't get any more calories down. The last hour to half an hour was just a real kind of pain cave of in the water. And it just that was really difficult. As soon as you start feeling sick, I was kind of swimming for maybe a couple of strokes, and then feeling sick and having to stop, and then having to carry on. So that was quite laborious.
Before you started the triathlon, what was your biggest fear? What was your biggest concern about going into it?
It was definitely the swim, and that turned out to be absolutely kind of accurate. Where it was such a new discipline to me, I didn't really know what to expect. I trained as much as I could, but I was aware that on the day there were just going to be things that I couldn't replicate, like sea conditions, It was also the furthest I'd swum, so I'd never swum that far in training. So it was just a total unknown to me. And for the kayak section the next day as well, it was just really dependent on weather. And that made me very nervous, having two sections of the triathlon that were just really dependent on things out of my control. On, my bike, I knew I could battle whatever really, but in a kayak, and especially for swimming, you're very dependent on being lucky with a good weather window.
I want to just go back and understand a couple of things here about logistics wise. How do you get to these islands, and then how do you travel between the islands?
So you can fly into Guernsey or Jersey. We got the ferry actually, because I had my kayak and my bike, and we just loaded up the van with all my gear and kind of some food for the few days. So ferry was the best option for us. So we got the ferry over to Guernsey, and then Sark doesn't have any cars allowed on it at all. It's this really quaint kind of small island. So what you need to do is get another ferry from either Guernsey or Jersey to Sark, and there's a small passenger ferry that goes there and comes back and kind of ferries people across. So we were on the passenger ferry with everyone else getting ready to go.
And each night, what were you doing, or where were you sleeping?
So for the most part, I was based in Guernsey. I had some local accommodation there, self-catering apartment that the tourism board very kindly helped us with. And then for the one night after the Jersey cycle, because we finished quite late, I was again based in an apartment on Jersey.
All right, let's talk about the kayaking part. First of all, tell me a little about your kayak.
My kayak is quite special, really. It's kind of a transformer-esque kayak. It breaks down into this, so I can pack it into what is basically the size of a golf bag. So it's got this kind of skeleton frame, and then it's got a skin that goes over the top of it. So it kind of looks like a normal kayak, but it's very deceptive because it packs down. And that's really handy for stuff like this. So we just packed it up, popped it in the back of the van, and off we go. And it just makes it really easy to transport it around.
When you're out there kayaking, how far offshore are you?
So we could always see the shore for the most part. So we would only have been maybe a mile offshore, but it was very foggy as well. So we could see it just about, but yeah, there was quite thick fog.
The tides were a challenge when you were swimming. What about during the kayaking part?
Yeah, we actually got really unlucky with the weather for the kayak section. So for the swim, it was kind of as good as we could have really hoped. Unfortunately, for the kayak section, we had really high winds forecast throughout the day. So we set off kind of knowing that was going to be an issue and just made as much progress as we could. We got kind of maybe 3/4 of the way round, and before we were going to go around the north side of the island, the weather warnings had just gotten worse and worse, and we'd already been battling all morning. So actually eventually the weather on that Sunday meant that we had to come off, and I ended up finishing the rest of the route on foot because it just wasn't safe to paddle anymore.
How are you keeping track of these weather warnings when you're out there?
We had the guys on the boat doing it, and I had a VHF radio as well. So we were checking in with local coast guards and things, and we just had apps as well. So we were just monitoring it from the night before, hoping it was going to get better.
How far did you make it before you had to stop kayaking?
17 miles eventually out of 28, and the rest were done on foot. So it actually ended up being a bit more. I ended up doing 13, so it should have been 28. I ended up doing about 31 miles altogether. But yeah, 17 of those were in the kayak.
When you got on foot, were you walking that or running it?
Bit of both. I mean, I only had like the shoes I was into kayaking. We didn't expect to be doing any of that. So I kind of was mostly walking and then jogging occasionally to mix it up and try and speed up the pace a bit.
I was kind of curious about, in your planning stages, did you have contingency plans for each of these stages where in case something happened that you had to quit, you had an alternate way of transportation or whatever? Did you think about those types of contingencies?
Yeah, so that was the main reason for having the support boat for both the swim and the kayak, because we knew that the weather we were so reliant on the weather, and especially for the swim. I was really vulnerable without that there. If anything had gone wrong, I would only have had a kayak. The point of the support boat was to make sure that if anything did go wrong, that we had a way basically to get back to shore and get back to safety. And also for other ships, visibility, things like that, to make sure that we had a support boat letting other kind of vessels in the area know that we were in the water.
Is there a lot of commercial shipping in that area?
There is some in certain parts, yeah, because it's quite a busy ferry network from France into the UK. There's those kind of big ferries that, commercial cruises as well for holiday destinations.
What was the most challenging part of that kayak part of it?
I mean, the morning was just pretty brutal. We were on the water for 7 a.m. and then it was just a really tough few hours. We got off eventually at 1 o'clock, and by the time we got off, I'd just been battling wind and tide non-stop. There was never kind of a moment's respite from it, apart from when we went into a sheltered bay briefly. And then actually the realization that I had to change my tactic and had to walk, like mentally that was really tough, because it felt like a mini failure, because I had come there to kayak round and ended up having to kind of finish it on foot. But actually it ended up being a really positive thing. But yeah, at the time it was tough I was very stubborn to get out of the water.
The final leg is the cycling. Tell me, first of all, a little bit about your bike.
It's a standard road bike that I've taken with me on a few adventures now and kind of slightly modified and put some panniers on it, which is frowned upon by strict road cyclists. But yeah, it's just a standard road bike that I've taken with me around a few places.
And what's it like to be cycling in Jersey? What are the roads like? What's the traffic volume like? So on.
You know what? Actually, it was really fantastic. I got joined by quite a few local cyclists. So for the first time in the whole section of the weekend, actually, I kind of just got to follow their lead. They knew the area really well. So, I got to see it through their eyes, and they took me through the route that they normally do. And that was fantastic. And actually, for the most part, we got really lucky. There wasn't huge amounts of traffic because we were by the coast for a lot of it. So there was a few hills, but yeah, traffic-wise, for the most part, we didn't really see anyone else. And it was a really great finish.
What do you see when you're out there? I mean, what's the landscape of this island like?
It's absolutely gorgeous. It was my first time visiting Jersey, actually, and it was just a brilliant way to see the island for the first time. When you have emerged onto the coast and you just see the hills drop down with the sea, crashing around, it was it was absolutely beautiful. And then from that into kind of up in the hills with fog again. We got a bit of fog again on the Monday. But yeah, it was just a stunning way to see the island. I think the Channel Islands are absolutely gorgeous.
Was there any part of the cycling that turned out to be more challenging than you expected?
Only in as much that by the time we got round to do the cycling leg, I was just physically very tired. So the first hour of the cycle was just really tough until I kind of found my cycling legs, because I hadn't really done much cycling. Yeah, it felt like quite a rude awakening for my legs that had been kind of not ready for it. But that's where it really helped having everyone with me, actually. Like, we had about 10 people there, and they were, by me all the time and talking and distracting me. And, finding out about their life on the island as well was a really welcome way of passing the time and ignoring the screaming in my legs.
How did these people come to ride with you? How did they find out about it?
So I was talking with the tourism boards of all three islands, because it was really important for me that I involved local people, and I wanted to kind of show everyone a different side to the island and how you can have an adventure really close to home. And so it just it spanned from that. Luckily, the guy at the tourism board, a chap called James, who was like abundantly helpful, also happened to be a really keen cyclist. So that just worked out really well. And he was part of a local cycling group, and then they just kind of spread the word. And I advertised it as well through my networks on social media and said, if anyone is local, I'd love to have some company.
So if I wanted to do this, well, not me specifically, because I live here in the United States, but if I lived over there and I wanted to do an adventure like this, what kind of cost am I looking at in terms of the ferry rides and staying in hotels and things like that?
So I think you can do it really cheaply. The ferry, if you book in advance, isn't much. I know when we first flew over, the flights from the UK were about £30. And in terms of the accommodation, the tourism board actually provided that for us. But I know there are kind of camping options. There's lots of different ways to do it. So I think actually it's a really affordable adventure. It's one of the ones I've done that I think can be pulled together quite quickly and is very accessible.
And you can rent kayaks if you need to?
Yeah, absolutely. The providers that accompanied me for the swim, and also in Guernsey, I had a local kayaker with me. There's Adventure Sark and Outdoor Guernsey, and both are super helpful and really approachable and really friendly. They organise quite a lot of tours around the islands anyway, so they'd definitely be good ones to chat to.
Looking back, what are your most memorable parts of this adventure?
I think it has to be the people, actually. Right from the get-go, the people of the Channel Islands, especially in Guernsey, was just so welcoming. I've made a couple of really good new friends there now. And I think having done quite a lot of adventures solo, I really noticed a sense of community and the difference that made to me on an adventure. Kind of having everyone involved and having everyone supporting you because they're engaged with the challenge as well was just really special.
It seems like a lot of people, well, a lot is let me rephrase this. At least in the terms of, it seems like in the adventure world, people tend to put together their own kind of triathlons. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone that's looking to put together their own triathlon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing for me with regards to this one was appreciating my gaps in knowledge. So absolutely, I think organize your own thing, but then just work out what you need help with. So my tidal knowledge and things like that, like route plotting, isn't my strongest suit. I know enough and I can kind of muddle through it, but I didn't want to kind of muddle through it. I wanted to make sure that actually, I was doing it safely and responsibly. So I think the first thing has got to be just find out where your weakness lies and how you can strengthen it. So for me, that was contacting the local people of Sark and saying, can you help me, check my route, and can you help me plot a good route round?
I want to transition into talking about the Caspian Challenge.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why you had that foldable kayak was you were planning to take it to, or you did take it to Russia to begin your Caspian Challenge adventure.
Yeah.
But not everything turned out with that adventure as you had planned. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about just briefly what your goal was in that adventure. And I guess the second part of the question is, how much time did you put into preparing to go over and do the Caspian Challenge?
Sure. So the Caspian Challenge aim was to paddle all 2,300 miles of the Volga River in Russia. And it should have taken me about 3 months. And it took, I would say, 9 months of solid planning. That was logistically a really full-on expedition to plan, even with regards to visas and just working out kind of stopovers. And just that was logistically huge. So that was 9 months of very, very full-on planning.
And how long were you there before you decided to return home?
So I ended up being there for a month in total, and 2 weeks of that month, roughly, just under, I think, actually spent off-river because we got a bit of a curveball while I was out there quite quickly. So 2 months of that was spent trying to reconfigure and replan the expedition from the ground.
Oh, what was the curveball?
So within 24 hours of landing in Russia, the expedition went viral on the internet and on media in general. So I was staying with these guys I'd met through a website called Couchsurfing, which basically just hosts travelers. And in an effort to help me, they put a post out on their version of Facebook, which is vk.com. It's, I think, Europe's kind of huge social media site, just saying this girl is traveling through Russia. If you can help, this is what she'll be doing. If you can put her up or, come say hi, I'm sure she'd really appreciate it. Just really normal post. And that just, I don't know, that went round the internet 20,000 times before I'd even left Moscow. So within the first 24 hours, this whole story had just blown up. It was on National Geographic. And I accidentally became a bit of a Russian celebrity and a time suspected spy.
What do you think was the cause of all this attention?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it's just something about the story of a female kind of solo traveler just captured everyone's imagination. A lot of women got in touch and they were like, "This is so exciting." So there was just a lot of excitement, and I think that they were very proud that someone was taking the time to see the river and see their country in that sort of way, because that was the main reason I was seeing Russia for the first time like this. I wanted to experience it, you know, traveling slowly through it and meeting people in villages and not just doing kind of all the touristy things. So I don't know if there was just something about that just, you know, everyone was very proud and everyone wanted to show me kind of their section of the river. And yeah, it's an interesting one because some guys had done it the year before and didn't get quite the same reaction. So it's quite unique.
Yeah, and on your blog, you have a story about how you're camping on the riverbank and there's people on the other side calling your name, and eventually they make it over and it's dark, it's night, you're sleeping, and they start bugging you to come out of your tent and sort of entertain them.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering about, you know, are there other stories, you know, what's kind of the strangest or the most annoying or the scariest thing that kind of happened to you when you were over there because of all this attention?
That night was definitely a very unsettling evening. So as it says in the blog, I was camped with a father and son that I'd met kind of further up along the river. We just decided to camp together that night, which was great. You know, I had the father kind of expressing that what they were saying in Russian wasn't very nice. And there was just a really sinister overtone to that night in particular. And the realization that I could have so easily been camped by myself and not had the father and son there, and especially the father trying to diffuse this really hostile situation was quite scary. And then there was just a general, amidst all the positivity and excitement, there was just a significant amount of, just sinister kind of intentions and messages that you don't really want to be getting as a female solo traveler.
Have you given any thought to trying it again sometime? And if the answer is yes, what might you do differently?
Perhaps. I mean, I haven't ruled it out completely. I think for me, the decision to return would just be if it dies down a bit. I actually still get messages from Russia now, and it's a year later. I would have been back actually about this time last year. So I'm still waiting for it not to be the main kind of topic of conversation, and it would be very difficult, I think, to do the journey again and remain kind of have that impartial anonymity, which I think is really important if you want to tell a story about the place you're traveling through. And that publicity and that kind of celebrity status just changed the nature of the expedition. So I haven't ruled it out. It would just be how to do it and to kind of not get as much attention, I think, especially if I was to do it again by myself. That attention left me quite vulnerable. It's a pending one. I'm not sure yet.
Well, has this changed the way you think about promotion of future adventures?
It's a really interesting point, actually, because part of my job in many respects is kind of publicizing these adventures and telling stories, especially if I'm working with brands. And I love sharing my adventures with people. And lots of adventures I've done haven't had that reaction. And lots of female solo travelers haven't had that reaction. So it's a very unique case. A couple of weeks after I was back, I set off to Ireland and didn't do a whole lot differently, just as a kind of curious to see what would happen. And I didn't kind of get people invading my campsite or things like that. So I think there's a compromise somewhere, you know, to be careful and to check out kind of the lay of the land while you're going. But I still think it's perfectly safe for girls to travel by themselves. I certainly wouldn't advise anyone against going to Russia. I think it's a really beautiful country. I just think it was one of those odd situations that with hindsight I'd perhaps behave differently, but such is life.
Let me switch topics and talk about your speaking, because I've noticed recently you've been doing a lot of speaking. And what do you enjoy about those talks that you give? I
love that I have an opportunity to connect with people and perhaps share an insight that they hadn't thought of. So I remember being in the audience at speaking, things like that, and just looking up on the stage and being like, wow, that person's absolutely amazing. I can't believe they've achieved all of these incredible things. And actually the realization that I try and put across is that I was in the audience once and now I'm on stage, and actually we all have that same ability, that same spark of potential within us. So what I really enjoy about speaking is that opportunity to stand up on stage and hopefully share my journey from kind of being a personal trainer to now kind of unleashing this endurance athlete that's very, very much possible for everyone sitting there.
What's been one of your favorite conferences or workshops or schools or events or whatever to talk at?
I'm really enjoying my school talks at the moment, actually. And I did one this week. They're just so fun. I think kids just so much more receptive and, they haven't had time to get old and bittered in their job and hate Mondays. So I turned up at Monday morning. They were just really stoked. They're really excited and they just have no filter for the questions they ask. And that energy is just really refreshing. So yeah, I got them to build a kayak with me and pretend to be my tent. And it's just really fun kind of seeing that geography and that passion for adventure come alive.
Well, you must kind of anticipate some of the questions that they're going to ask you, but what's been some questions from these kids that has surprised you?
So back when I first started doing the talks, I didn't really know what to expect, especially from some of the younger ones. They just, that was quite intimidating, actually, having this room full of like overexcited 5-year-olds. And they just went straight into toilet questions, like, but where do you go to the toilet? And things like that are really fun. And then the other day, a kid, like this 4-year-old kid, just really surprised me. And he's like, "How many continents have you visited?" And I'm like, "I don't remember, knowing the word continent when I was 4, but well done."
Laura, what's next for you?
I'm not sure just yet. I've got a month or 2 of kind of video editing and speaking, so I'll be UK based at least for the next month or 2. And then the end of the year, I'll be in Nepal, and I'm still trying to figure out basically the specifics of that, but I know I'll be in Nepal for around November time.
Video editing, what's that about?
So we filmed a lot of the Channel Islands Triathlon. And we're just making that into a short film at the moment, which is really fun. So I've been reliving that all of this week.
Do you have plans to put that out to festivals?
Perhaps. I don't know if it'll turn into a long enough film for that. But it's more just to kind of, have it for use at talks and to have on YouTube as a kind of thing I can send people and publicize as a very accessible weekend adventure. Because effectively that's what it was. It was done in 3 days.
How can people contact you if they want to learn more?
I would love them to. My website, as you mentioned earlier, is lauraexplorer.com, and you can find me on Facebook and Twitter as well, but the links to that are on the website, so that's probably the best place to start.
Laura Kennington, congratulations on your Channel Islands Triathlon accomplishment, and thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Recorded July 1st, 2016. For more great podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.